Hey there everyone, my name is Luke and welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to bring you a look at some processing software that I've recently purchased, and honestly I think that my images are the best that they've ever been, and it's all thanks really to the inclusion of this processing software. The software I'm talking about is Topaz AI. Now I bought the full suite myself because I'm going to use it for terrestrial photography as well, but the ones I use mainly for deep sky are Gigapixel AI and Denoise AI. Sometimes together, sometimes completely separately, but the main thing is it really has changed the game for me. I've never been getting images that are this good. Now before I start the video, I just want to get this straight out of the way and say there are affiliate links for this program in the description down below. There's a 15% discount code that I've also got for you guys to use for anybody who's interested in purchasing it. That'd be fantastic. But I feel like I need to say that I'm not sponsored by Topaz or anybody at all for that matter. All my thoughts on my own, and I bought this software myself at full price, and I would do it again, honestly. So if you hear me gushing about this software, because I'm likely to, I really do like it, it's not because I've been paid to do so, it's just because genuinely I like it. Anyway, all that said, let's get started. We all know astrophotography can be costly, time consuming, frustrating, just to name a few things. It's many other things than that, but all that said, I love it. We've all got our own reasons for doing it, or indeed maybe wanting to get started in the hobby. There's probably a list a mile long of valid reasons for why someone might want to do this hobby still, even for all its flaws. For me, one of the main reasons I absolutely love it so much is because out of all the hobbies that I do have taken part in and still do take part in, none of them gives me that sense of wonder that this still does. Just like those first photographs I took, it's never gone. In fact, it's probably only intensified as I've gotten better at the hobby. Like I said, really, even from those first shots, even back then, it just sparks my imagination off in a way that no other hobby that I do kind of can. It's just this one. So I absolutely love shooting all different types of targets. Love it. The main thing for me, I guess, my absolute favorite targets, if I had to pick, are got to be galaxies as well, because really whenever I look at a galaxy, it doesn't matter how faint or smudgy the image is, or even how small it is in the field of view, those faint tiny background galaxies, I just can't help but let my imagination run a little bit wild, and I start wondering, you know, what is out there living on that thing? Perhaps what does it do day to day? Is it maybe taking photos back of our own Milky Way at the same time? It gives me a kind of connection, I feel. I hope it doesn't sound too crazy with this, but it doesn't really matter the distance between us and that other galaxy. Just the thought that maybe we're doing the same thing connects us in some way, and that's just one of the reasons that I really do love this hobby and get so much out of it. Now, I realise not everybody is going to be absolutely crazy about this hobby like I am, or maybe you are as well too. You probably are if you're watching this video. I'd just like to say though, you know, for me it's a lot more than just the picture on the screen or the pixels that it's made up of. None of that really particularly matters to me. It's more just the feeling that it evokes inside me from taking those pictures for myself. It's not the same as just typing into Google and looking at pretty space images, of which there's thousands. The actual act of taking the images myself is one of the things that makes it so special. So I won't waste your time really by going into this too much more and trying to explain myself and how I feel about it, but I imagine probably if you're watching this video then you've already got some kind of idea about what it is I'm talking about. At least I hope you do. So as probably many of you already know, there's a lot more to this hobby though than just taking those photographs. To get a good picture, there's also a lot of involvement in post-processing using different types of programs. Now, there's many ways to process your images. We can all agree on that one. But there's one thing that we kind of all have in common, regardless of whether you're just starting out with a DSLR on a tripod, or if indeed you're involved in the Hubble Space Telescope. And that's at some point or another when you're processing your images, you're going to come up against noise. Now you can take more data, you can use faster scopes, better cameras, darker skies, better filters, you name it. There's a myriad of ways in which you can improve your images, but none of them are going to make you truly escape noise. It's just here to stay, and we have to learn with ways to deal with it to get the best out of your images. This was a real sticking point for me for a long time. I was using free processing software. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. And for the longest time I was determined I was going to stick to free processing software and try and get the absolute most out of it, because after all, that 200 euros that PixInsight or whatever your chosen weapon is, whatever it costs, in my mind I was better off putting that towards maybe a scope upgrade or putting it towards another camera, mount, filters, again, things like that. I always thought that that's going to have more of an impact on my images, but the truth is it just doesn't. Nothing makes as big of an impact on your image quality as good processing does. Now, eventually I did, of course, download PixInsight Trial, and I have to see what it was all about after seeing loads of images online, looking at Astrobin and you name it, just lots of these places where you can see these beautiful astro images. And one thing I was noticing cropping up again and again and again is none of them were using free processing software, really. It was always paid stuff, and it's one of those things in life, you tend to get what you pay for. Safe to say, before the end of the PixInsight trial was up, after a really rocky start, I'm going to be totally honest with you, my images were terrible when I first started out processing in PixInsight. I just couldn't get to grips with it. But I stuck it out and kept trying and getting incrementally better, which is I think what it's all about. And sure enough, before the trial was up, I think it's a 45-day trial, my images were better than they'd ever been before, and nothing else had changed. In fact, I was still processing the same data again and again, right from the start, and there was just a marked difference right from the start to the finish, and there was absolutely no going back. I had to purchase it, and I'm really glad I did. In fact, my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner, because it made such a difference. Kind of with that regret fresh in my mind about why didn't I get into this sooner, I try and approach processing software and things like that now with a bit more of a perhaps an open mind about seeing what it can do first before judging whether it's for me or not. And that kind of brings me on nicely to Topaz. So a good friend of mine named Peter, I've been friends with him for years and years, and I trust him, and he sent me some pictures through email, and he sent them to a few of my other friends too. And it was basically some before and afters. He downloaded Topaz himself, and the shots that he sent just kind of made me question, what am I doing? Because I saw this huge leap of a difference between the before and after. And yeah, once I'd calmed down and stopped accusing him of being involved in witchcraft and things like that, he kindly explained what it was all about and that it was Topaz that had done it. And really that kind of lit a fire underneath me, and I thought, hang on, I've really got to get on board with this if I want my images to be the best that they can be. So I set straight to work. I didn't let the grass grow beneath my feet this time, and I downloaded it all. I downloaded the suite because I realized that it's usable with terrestrial photography too, which takes some of the sting out of making this sort of magnitude of purchase on software. And what can I say? Immediate improvements. It really was quite as simple as dragging, let's say, some old masters of my images, you know, as you save them out to enjoy on your computer or share with your friends or whatever. Just plonked them into Topaz and clicked a few buttons, and then moments later I had a better image than I'd initially put in. Literally moments. So of course I worked through my entire back catalogue of images. I worked through loads and loads and loads of them, and across the board it was just improvements, better images all around, much less noise, and in some cases even better details. It's important to note that with certain settings Topaz can add details that aren't there, but I'm not really about that kind of thing. I just want to enhance what already is there and go no further, and also hopefully, well, in all cases, really reduce the amount of noise, because that's one of those things that detracts from an image for me. Now, once I'd done that for a while, I decided, okay, I've gone through this catalogue of images now, how can I start integrating this into my PixInsight workflow and perhaps use Topaz to even more of my own advantage and make my images better and better? So I did. I started exporting images from PixInsight in a starless state, no stars involved, and work on them in Topaz, bring them back into PixInsight, and then put the stars back in later. And it really has changed things completely for me now, and as you've probably seen if you watched some of my newer videos, at least in my mind, my images are better than they've ever been before, and that's really the only thing that's changed. Now I realise I've talked on and on and on here, and I want to say if you're still here, thank you very much indeed for your patience. I just wanted to give you some backstory as to how it's worked for me, because I expect that this is probably a similar story to anybody watching this who already uses the software. I imagine you've probably had a very similar experience to it that I have. But I think now we can jump over to the PC and I'll actually start showing you some real examples. Alright then, so hopefully you can see here on the screen that I've got the Topaz Denoise AI, Sharpen AI, Gigapixel AI. I've also got a PixInsight shortcut here for you. And I've got a small selection of images. I've been through my collection of shots that I've taken over the years, and I've picked out a few that are notable because of the amount of noise in them. So that's not to say that all my images aren't noisy, because they are really, but these are in particular very noisy. So if I just zoom right in, let's say this is a 30-minute total shot on Cygnus Wall. I took this with an Esprit 80 and a 1600mm class camera. It was actually QHY163, but hopefully you can see it's just one 10-minute shot each of hydrogen, oxygen and sulfur, and it's got this incredibly grainy appearance. I hope that that's coming through properly for you guys on YouTube there, but that should give you an idea of the kind of noise levels that we're working with. Some of these are my newer shots, so let's say this from the Esprit 120 and the 2600. Again, when I zoom right in though, this is a 356% zoom, I realise, which is pretty crazy, but you can see also this noisy background, this kind of mottled salt and pepper noise, I would call it, sort of thing. Topaz is going to work really well on that, I should hope. So without showing you all of them anyway, you get the rough idea, and I'm just going to jump over right now into Denoise AI. I think we'll go with first. I'll open the program up, and I think we will look at this wall image first, Cygnus Wall. So in this view, you can hopefully see that it's going to buffer up a few different types of AI enhancement. So in the top left, we've got the image original as it is. You can pan around it and choose the point that you want to preview. You can zoom in and out and get kind of the focus on the part of the image that you want just for this preview to make it happen a bit faster, or perhaps pay attention to certain details in the image. And you can see that these other sets of windows here, you've got it set to the comparison view mode, which is going to let you compare 3 other processing modes to the original file. So hopefully you can see right here straight away, both standard, low light and clear have all had a marked difference on the amount of noise in the image. I really do hope this is coming across properly for you there. So maybe some right here, that's a decent part that's showing some nebula. So clear has perhaps introduced a few little artifacts. These are completely normal things that you can expect from this program. That's why I start to take out the stars before processing. But standard has actually just sharpened up the stars a little bit and made them look quite pretty for the limited amount of data. And low light has also had a nice effect. We are zoomed into a crazy degree. Normally you'd be viewing the image much more further out, like perhaps like this. I'll just let this process up a moment. And you can hopefully see the amount of difference it's had, especially in these dark areas, such as this section of dusty nebula up here, or perhaps below the actual main part of the nebula itself. It's gotten rid of kind of all of that noise. It's just quite phenomenal what it's doing. If we just check further down again, perhaps on a different part of the nebula. Hopefully that's also apparent to you there. You can see that it's gotten rid of all that noise, preserved most of the detail in this case, and this is on a really limited data set, so it's going to have a hard time differentiating between signal and noise. This is really a worst usage case scenario, and it's still done a fantastic job. Alright, so I've just gone ahead and opened the Horsehead image. Just go ahead and close the wall image that I was showing you there a moment ago. Just reopen this, and I think if we focus, let's say right here to begin with, so on the Horsehead itself and this background wall of nebulosity, you should see just what sort of an effect it has. So this is obviously mono data in this case. This is one of the reasons I included this, because it's a very limited data set in terms of integration time, and it's also monochromatic, just to let you know that it does work really well on mono images and not just color ones. I think to my eye, clear has maybe introduced a little bit of noise, but it does look, true to its name, quite clear. I think if I was to choose on this one, I'd probably just use standard mode, as that looks the most pleasing to my eye, at least on this section of nebula. I'll just move across and look at the flame itself. And really, yeah, once again, I would say that perhaps standard to my eye is the most true to the source data. Not that any of these are really stepping way beyond the mark or anything like that, because it's all on quite low settings. You can turn the amount of noise reduction up to really high degrees, depending on the amount of noise and type of noise in your own images. But let's put it on a challenging star here. This is Alnitak. And yeah, it's not introduced any weird artifacts or anything like that. If you can see, perhaps there's a small amount of micro lens diffraction. That's because this was taken with a Panasonic 1600 sensor. They're famed for doing that around bright stars. But it's certainly not added any additional artifacting to that image right there. I'd say that's a fantastic result. And if I wanted to go ahead with that, let's say, I could just click Save Image on standard mode there. I'll just save that to the desktop a moment. Okay, that image is saved, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. I think we can take another look at, I don't know, maybe the Veil Nebula right now. So this was a noisy image. I remember there wasn't very much integration at all gone into this. This was a Spree 120, 2600 MC and L extreme data. If maybe we look down here at these filamentary regions and we zoom right in to about 200%. Change the view to comparison view and we can see which one we like the best. Alright, so they've all buffered up now, and to my eye it's really a bit of a toss-up is this one. I think low light or again standard mode is giving the nicest results. There's a tiny little bit kind of a ringing artifact maybe on the clear setting. I do like to use the clear setting sometimes though when I'm importing starless images into this program. As you can notice, the edges of the nebula, like along the fine edge of this filament, has become quite sharp thanks to this AI software. I think taking a look at this though, the one I'd probably go with, just looking at this little segment, it would be low light in this case. I'll just move it along and we can take another look at a different part. This should be quite a challenging section. There's a lot of filamentary detail here, and I think it could, well, it should have a hard time differentiating between signal and noise, but it seems to have done a fantastic job. It's left all this alone in the background. It's correctly identified that that is signal we want to keep. Yeah, low light over here, again, I'd say perhaps the best setting. Clear maybe is a little bit too sharp, but when you view it at a more reasonable zoom level, you can see the zoom up here. Perhaps just change it to 100%. So this would be a 1-to-1 ratio on screen. Then all of a sudden clear, those sharpened stars start to look very, very good indeed actually. It's only when you're zooming into an extreme degree to check things out that you can see any sort of artifacting. This is an interesting region of the nebula. And once again, we'll just wait a moment for it to buffer things up. So you can probably notice something that happens here. This is a really good section to show you on actually. There's a kind of a loss of colour saturation. So it's not lost any detail as such, but it has lost some saturation, and that's something obviously that's extremely easy to correct for. You just raise your saturation slider in whatever processing software you like, but you'll introduce that saturation back and it'll actually be in a less noisy state than it was before still, because it's gone to such a fantastic degree of denoising. And again, I think perhaps if I had to pick, maybe standard on this segment. So it's really a toss-up between those two settings for me on this one. So now if we take a look at this M33 data, if I just focus on maybe there's a little knotty section of nebula here, and I'll zoom right in, 267% zoom, so a bit unrealistic, but hopefully we can see the effect that it's had. So there's a lot of mottling noise. I really pushed the saturation on this image, which brought out that mottle. But basically it looks like standard mode again, maybe low light as well. I've done absolutely fantastic jobs at denoising this image to just kind of an awesome degree really, without losing any of that detail that you want to keep. Let's look perhaps towards the galactic core and make sure nothing's lost. And no, I would say on standard mode it looks better. Perhaps needs a slight contrast enhancement, and again, slight bit of saturation, but this is really nothing. It's a very, very small price to pay for the amount of denoising this software is giving you. Now, if we check somewhere, perhaps in the total background, around these little stars here with diffraction spikes, see what effect it has, and wow, what a denoising job it's done on that. So clear, it looks really sharp when you look back here, but there is a slight ringing artifact to my eye. So I'd probably only use this again when I've taken the stars out of an image. There's a slight ringing to the low light ones, but the standard setting looks really good to my eye. And it's also completely gone rid of all that background mottling noise. Here you can particularly see there's quite a lot of dark mottle that's occurring. Let's see what it does with that. So that's really smoothed things out to a fantastic degree. There's no longer kind of a crunchy segment in between like you can see hopefully here. I know this is probably going to be hard to view through YouTube compression, but I'll try and zoom in even further and show you what I'm talking about if it's not already apparent. I'm sure this will be something I can just clip out if not needed. But yeah, it's totally smoothed this out. It's just incredible how well it works. So now we're taking a decent look at Denoise AI. I want to kind of take a look at Gigapixel AI and show you what that's all about. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it up. This time I'm going to pick, let's say, the Elephant Trunk Nebula. So this is some data that Chloe took with her Red Cat and the 1600 mm kit. So this is just a crop of the full image that she'd taken, and I think I probably used this as the thumbnail for the video. But let's take a look at what it's doing right now. So low resolution mode has really nicely denoised that image. It's maybe slightly over sharpened those stars, I don't know. Very compressed is doing that kind of thing where it becomes telltale that this has been some AI enhancement, because if you'll notice in a moment once it processes this up, there's some added detail that just simply doesn't exist. You can see all this kind of, what would it say, like a wood effect almost to it. It might look good when it's zoomed out, but right here it looks pretty awful. Art and CG is a very nice setting, at least in this segment. If I zoom right in, way too far really on the trunk for a 250mm scope, you can see a lot of pixelation in the standard image here up in the top left. And yet with just 2 times AI upscale, it's become almost like an image taken with double, triple the focal length. It just looks really, really believable. I'm pretty much blown away, I'm going to be honest, with how well it's working on this one. If you take a look at 4 times upscale, again, really super zoomed in. So that looks just fantastic. Compared to what it's got to work with here, this just pixelated, kind of not really much to go off. And it's figured all this out on its own. Again, very compressed is adding details, and I absolutely would not use that setting in this particular image. But art and CG doesn't seem to be adding anything really that's not already there. And if it, probably the one that's truest to the source data is going to be low resolution in this case. Especially this little section of bright nebula here looks like it's just been, it was always there. It's just like, let me see it now. It's just so fantastic. If I go perhaps a little bit further down, this nice little bright section of the trunk there. So this is a lot of overlapping sections of nebula, and hopefully you can see it's very pixelated on the original image, and yet it's just been brought to being completely believably smooth edged. It's how it does this, I'll never know, but I'm glad that it does, because it lets you use a much smaller scope than you would otherwise require to get details of this magnitude. You can hopefully see as well, it's also upscaled these stars perfectly. So this is a star on the source image that's made of like 9 pixels or something like that, and over here it's a cleanly resolved little star. It's just unbelievable how well it can work. So if we zoom out a little bit more to a more reasonable viewing amount, we can see how this might look when you're viewing it standard zoom on your monitor. So there's the original Low resolution mode looks fantastic, really smooth background. Art and CG looks a little bit pastel perhaps to my eye now looking at that. And very compressed again, it's just not a good setting for this. About down here towards this section of Dark Nebula. So yeah, once again, you can see even though it's got not really much to go off, it's managed to fill in the blanks to a completely believable degree. It's not adding anything in that I'd say is shouldn't be adding. Very compressed again. Once it might work on some images, but I've not really had much luck with that particular module to this program. It's really always been art and CG and low resolution mode for me that's been working the best. So I'm going to take another look now at a different image. Alright, so this should hopefully demonstrate really nicely. I'm zoomed in a long way into this image right now. As you can see, the tiny little galaxy is filling each quadrant of the screen here. But once again, low resolution has just cleaned things up to just a fantastic degree. It's a really admirable job. Art and CG in this case perhaps looks maybe a tiny touch pastel, but it's really hard to tell at this kind of zoom. Once again, very compressed it's just not got the memo. It's introducing details that are just not there, and I wouldn't want to do that personally, but if that's something you want to do, then by all means, just do it. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. So if you can see up on the top right, there's a little preview of the main screen, and I can see there's a tiny little galaxy up here. So this is one of those little background galaxies that always captures my imagination. Perhaps sometimes even more than the foreground stuff. But hopefully you can see all this salt and pepper and color mottle noise has been totally eliminated by low resolution mode, art and CG mode. Very compressed seems to be adding some shadowy artifacts, which, I mean, of course, aside from the obvious, it's doing something pretty awful to the galaxy itself. That really isn't agreeing very well with space images right now. So, if I zoom in even further, perhaps this should show you just how good this software is right now. There's nothing really to be worked with on the main image. You can roughly see that it's a spiral galaxy and there's a couple of stars, but the amount of noise it has to deal with, and it can still denoise it using this particular software, Gigapixel AI. You don't have to first pass it through Denoise AI, as it's quite capable of denoising on its own. I think my favourite view right now here is art and CG mode, as it looks to have just, I don't know, it's just removed all that noise in such a believable fashion that I can almost not believe it because of how good it is. Perhaps one more decent test is there's a very faint extension to this small galaxy down here. You can hopefully see that just kind of casting off the bottom, a bit like a loop. So low resolution mode has correctly identified it as a signal and it's left it alone. Very compressed mode is getting these strange blotches again, and art and CG has also done a very admirable job. Again, what can I say? This is an incredibly low contrast situation, going from this background to identifying that that's a tidal extension, and yeah, it's done it successfully, figured it out, and not nuked that detail that we wanted to keep. It's done an awesome job. Just again, another really quick close-up. In this case, I almost nearly like that detail that very compressed has added into it. It may be nice to take one version of that image and kind of blend it in 50% to one of these more normal ones and kind of get some of that extra detail, because it looks like there's nearly a boomerang shape there in the main image that it's kind of identified over here. And I quite like that, but if I just had to pick on this, again, it's probably a toss-up between art and CG and low resolution, but I'd probably go low resolution mode on this particular section of the image. If we just zoom out and see what it's done over the course of the whole thing, maybe drop the amount of extra scaling that it's doing. Yeah, so we can see right away that very compressed mode is definitely introducing some sort of artifacts to this. As I mentioned before, this is just scraping the surface on this program. You can actually add a lot more denoising if you want and things like that, but this is all quite conservative settings, and I just wanted to run through this and give you a basic introduction to it all. Alright, I really do hope that you enjoyed seeing those examples there on the PC. Hopefully it's let you know just what this program is all about and how it can be used to your own advantage without going perhaps too far, but it's all down to you. Maybe you do want to take your images to the absolute nth degree and go wild. Why not? We're not taking images really for scientific purposes here, it's just for your own enjoyment. So do whatever you enjoy, and that's, nobody can tell you to do otherwise, really. If you enjoyed the video, then please do leave a like for me, as that really does help the channel grow, helps it reach more people, which is something I absolutely want to do, but I'll need your help to do it. So if you could do that, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Well, I think that's about it. I just want to take a moment to quickly say thank you very much indeed for watching. A very special thank you to all my YouTube channel members and the support that you guys give. It's just absolutely out of this world, and I can't thank you enough, but I'll try. So thank you. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed the video, and until next time, clear skies.